Remember a story we brought you about a judge who was discriminated against based on the narrative on an airplane? Well, we have that exclusive interview coming up in just a moment. Let me remind you of the coverage. Here it is. Pamela Hill-Veal, a retired Black circuit court judge from Chicago, is now suing American Airlines for racial discrimination, claiming a male flight attendant told her to, quote, use the bathroom in the back of the plane, even though she was booked to fly in first class. The federal civil complaint against the airline alleges that the flight attendant, whose name and race were not disclosed, racially profiled her during a flight from Chicago to Phoenix. This happened on February 10th. With millions watching and many people benefiting from this program called Indisputable, we just need 1% of the viewers to become a paid member so we can continue to bring this content to you. Now back to the show. And there's a lot more to this story. We have on the program Judge Pamela E. Hill-Veal and also attorney Lester Barclay, CEO and founder of the Barclay Law Group. Good to have you both. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for having us.
Likewise, good evening.
Well, I wish it was under better circumstances, but I want to dig into this because this is the first time you're talking about this in depth. And I'm sure that there are nuances that happen that we may not be privy to. So Judge, I'm going to go to you first. Can you give us in your own words, contextualize what happened that day on the airplane?
Well, first of all, we boarded American flight from Chicago to Phoenix, and we were on first class. So when I say we, I'm referring to my husband and my mother. Mm-hmm. The first thing that happened was the flight attendant attempted to get my husband to change his seat so that someone else could sit next to the person they wanted to sit next to. Now, my mother is 4A, I'm 4C, and my husband is 4D. So the guy in 4F did not want my husband sitting there. He wanted someone else to sit there. My husband refused. He refused to do it. And the flight attendant left. And then I think he came back a second time to make sure that my husband would not give up his seat. And my husband was very, very emphatic about, I'm not giving up my seat. This is my wife and this is my mother-in-law, and I have to take care of them. So that was it. And that is something that my husband says he always felt as though that's what started this all. Since he couldn't do him, then he ended up doing me. And when I went to the restroom the first time, when I came out, he told me that I slammed the door and that there are people sleeping on the flight. And if you look around, everybody, most of those people had iPads, earplugs, and he said they were sleeping. I was disturbing them. I didn't say a word. I just walked onto my seat. The second time that I used the restroom, when I came out, he said, I told you not to slam the door. So from now on, you're to use the bathroom at the back of the plane. I looked at him and I told him there were other people that had used the restroom. There were 3 white guys that used the restroom and you didn't say anything to them about slamming the door. And I just went to my seat and sat there. The third time that I went, he followed me back to my seat. He touched me on my shoulder, told me that I was going to be arrested because he didn't like the way I spoke to him and that I hit him. I told him I did not hit you. And that was it. The plane, right before it landed, the pilot had said that everyone is to remain seated because we're going to have law enforcement come on board. Law enforcement did not come on board. They were at the bridge. But when the plane landed, an American Airlines rep came to my seat, asked me to follow him, and I did. I asked my husband to take care of my mother. My mother, well, that's not important, but I asked him to take care of my mother. I get up and I leave. All of this is happening in front of them. And, I go out and the police are there. And so I went to one of them and he was in front of me. And I said, I understand that you're arresting me. There was a policeman in back. And if anyone saw the movie Karen on Prime Video, he reminded me of that policeman. And he told me, go get your bags from baggage. I told him I don't have any bags. And I continued to talk to the gentleman that was in front of me. So I told him, I understand that you're here to arrest me. And he said, no, we are not arresting you. You can leave. Now, when at that point, the American Airlines rep took me out and we're sitting at the gate and he asked me what happened. I explained to him. When he left, a woman came over to me and said that she was sorry. I overheard your conversation, da, 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 da. And I want you to know the same thing happened yesterday, which was February 9th. And I said, what did you say? And she said the same thing happened yesterday. And I didn't get her name. I didn't know if she was an airline employee or airport employee, but that was interesting to me. And then as I'm sitting there, all these people are coming off, they're looking at me, they're snickering and all this other kind of stuff. But here you have I think the flight attendant was 30-ish. I'm 70 years old. And for someone to be pointing their finger at me in my face, very close, because it was close proximity. It was berating, it was humiliating. But I knew I was not going to say anything to him because I think they want you to say something so that they would have an excuse to arrest you. I was not arrested. I ended up talking to that policeman the next day, the one that I told you that I was talking to. And he told me the flight attendant had no authority to say that I was going to be arrested. He said, the only person that has that authority is me, the police officer. He said, so he never should have threatened that you were going to be arrested. So that was basically, the story.
This is heartbreaking, makes my blood boil. Mm-hmm. A lot more detail to the story. Attorney, let me go to you because there seems to be, based on our research when we were preparing to do this story initially, there seems to be some specific discrimination happening at that particular airline, American Airlines. We saw that in our research. We also heard the echo chamber, as the judge has said, that people were saying something very similar happened to me. So, attorney, I want you to give us kind of the legal overview of how you see this discriminatory action against Judge Veal.
Well, there are a plethora of incidents that we have found that are consistent with Judge Veal's story about how American Airlines treats its African-American passengers. She just wasn't an economy passenger, wasn't a coach passenger. She paid for 3 first-class tickets in excess of $4,000. Some of us don't have the ability to fly first class, but certainly if you're going to pay for a first class seat, you ought to be treated with everything that comes with that. And so we're exploring all kinds of remedies for Judge Veal. She's an esteemed jurist, highly reputable, and a person who is an asset in our community. And we're going to bring to bear every civil rights violation that we can amass to make sure that American Airlines is held fully accountable for its actions, not just to Judge Veal, but to other African-American passengers that have been disrespected. I mean, when you have a situation where someone makes a public announcement, and we've all been there, everybody remain in your seats because there's a situation that needs to be addressed. And no one is pointed out, no one's fingered out but one person, then that leads you to believe that maybe she did something that was unlawful or something that needs to be dealt with by law enforcement. So that's defamatory to her as well. So we're looking at all of these possibilities of holding them accountable for their actions.
Judge Veal, I want to go back to you because one dynamic you mentioned that really stuck out to me is when he said, you have to go use the restroom in the back of the plane. I want to make sure I highlight and nuance this properly. When you buy first class, and I've been fortunate to ride first class every now and then, there's a particular customer service dynamic that you are offered because that's the hierarchy of business. That's the way it works. For you to be treated that way, and you are considered to be the top customer of the airline because of their business hierarchy, that was already a red flag. And then him saying for you to use the restroom at the back of the plane came across to me like a racial trope. In that moment when he said that, did you feel the racist or any racist sentiment by that statement?
Absolutely. And in the letter that I originally sent to American Airlines, my last sentence was, "This incident was so degrading while reminding my family and me of Miss Rosa Parks and her being ordered to go to the back of the bus in the 1950s. Believe it or not, this is 2024. That was the last sentence on my letter to them. And some of the people, some of the comments that I would read online, I don't read them all, but some people have directed me to them, making comments, who do you think you are? You're a judge, da, 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 da. First of all, when I fly, I am Joe Blow. My name is Pamela Veal, or Pamela Mann, my married name. I do not call attention to myself. That is the last thing that I want to do. You have in first class 20 people, and then the three of us, we're the only ones that are African Americans. And as I recall, maybe the only ones that are minority. And for me to be treated that way, it was horrible. Can you imagine what it's like for you to think at this age, the police are out there waiting for you? That walk from my seat to the bridge was the slowest walk I have ever made. My mother is watching, my husband's watching, and everybody else is watching. And it's all focused in on you because you allegedly slammed a bathroom door.
You walking to that, to that bridge, you were under the assumption that this individual has called the police. That assumption was correct. And that you were going to at least be arrested, maybe gets worked out later in court. You have the context of the judicial system. A person can get arrested based on what another individual says happened, okay? And you go up to the officer, you provide really no contrary anything. You just say, hey, I heard you were here to arrest me. Like that's one of the most compliant responses I could ever imagine. I can't imagine a person who would say that to the officer is somehow adversarial during a multi-hour flight. It doesn't make sense.
You should note that after we initially made contact with American Airlines, they indicated that Judge Veal was intoxicated.
Highly intoxicated.
And
wow.
Any of her friends who know her know that she does not drink like that. And if she was so intoxicated as they described in their response, then why didn't they arrest her? Why did they let her go back and escort her mother off the plane, her aging mother off the plane? If that in fact was the case, that's just far from the case. That's just another level of disrespect that we've had to deal with American Airlines.
As well as being highly intoxicated, I was aggressive. They alleged that I was aggressive with the flight attendant. You intentionally know what not to say to people when they are trying to edge a confrontation with you. And those police officers in Phoenix, I'm standing there, I'm talking to him, I'm just very close to him. He could have smelled liquor. He told me to go ahead and just and very polite. That particular officer was very polite. Just go ahead and get your bags.
The officer obviously observed the situation and saw that it was a big nothing burger. Sometimes they kind of come guns blazing, no pun intended. But naturally they assess, and he's right. The officer is the one who makes the judgment call, not the flight attendant. In the back and forth, when you were assessed basically by the officer, allowed to go back because they deemed you to be no threat, you are allowed to go back, escort your mother off of the plane. Do you run back into this flight attendant?
I did not see the flight attendants once I got off the plane.
Okay.
And when I just moved back to get to the plane, I saw my husband getting to my mother. So there was no need for me to go all the way back to my seat or anything. And then also there was that rep, the American Airlines rep, who asked me to follow him so that he could figure out what happened, what was my side of the story or whatever.
My next question is to provide atmosphere, and I'm not trying to be overly probative. You're 70 years of age. Your mother is how old?
You know, she will kill me. Wait,
don't do it.
Repeat that on me.
Don't do it.
Okay.
Don't do it. I understand.
So wait a minute. You can figure it out.
That's right.
I don't have a problem saying how old I am, but I tell you what, if you saw her, you wouldn't think that was my mother. Most people don't.
She looks like her sister.
Yeah, she looks like
That's
my
amazing. That's a good life, good genes. So she's older than you, and then your husband, who's comparable in age as well. So basically, this is you all are the only African Americans in that section. You are also a senior citizen, and I say that in all due respect. We're supposed to be respectful. This is a courtesy, but in the context of business, so much more courtesy should have been provided to you. And that beginning story about your husband being told or requested to move, and how that scenario happened, it seemed as if it created the catalyst for the targeting that took place afterwards. Has this been an issue that American Airlines has addressed, or have they ignored that?
They ignored it. Now, when they wrote the letter to me, they didn't focus on anything, any of my allegations. Now, we did receive a phone call with a representative that ended up talking to Attorney Barclay. Now, it was interesting, your conversation with her.
Let's hear it, as much as you can share, Attorney.
It wasn't anything that was any commitment to take responsibility for what happened. It seemed to be a hollow apology that I'm sorry this took place. It focused more on Judge Veal being a long-term American Airlines, traveler. And so they were respectful of that. However, it was nothing that really came out and said, we're going to assume responsibility. It was more in the lines of her husband and her mother. I'm not sure if they got their points, and maybe that is the consideration we can give them for their frequent flyer miles. And I was taken aback by it, because I was like, this is a very serious matter. This is a violation of someone's civil rights. And if that's the best you can do by way of showing any contrition, then we don't have much to discuss. We'll discuss this in a court of law.
Have they offered mediation?
Nothing. When they called me at 8:19 in the morning, when I'm asleep, and that's when she was talking about being highly intoxicated, she said there was nothing they could do for me.
Okay. Wow. All right. It seems as if they're just begging for a fight, because obviously you're open to conversation. Typically, a major corporation would at least bring you to the table for mediation. Mediation is non-binding. If you don't agree to it anyway, it's no harm done. At least you have an understanding of clarity of what both parties, what they bring to the table, what they are claiming happened, right? So, attorney, what's the next step here if American Airlines, if they decide to continue this barrier approach and not actually talk sensibly about what happened to Judge Veal?
Well, we have, of course, placed a formal complaint before American Airlines. Our next step is to formalize that with a lawsuit, which we're exploring all legal options at this point. But that seems to be the next step, because we will move in that direction if we don't hear from them in a meaningful way.
What's the time frame? You always got to give companies like this a time frame? What's your time frame generally?
Well, the clock is ticked. So there are only a few more seconds left before you'll see an actual filing. But I anticipate the next 2 to 4 weeks are critical for American Airlines to respond in a meaningful way, in a very serious way. What this speaks volumes. I mean, and as I was thinking and processing, I shared this with Judge Veal. She has her elderly mom there in first class. If she had to take her all the way to the back of the plane to use the restroom, that's a serious inconvenience for someone who is elderly.
Right.
So there's so many dynamics here and levels of disrespect that are almost unimaginable. And so to allow that particular individual who was working for the airlines to not be held accountable for this, that simply means he's going to do it to the next person, and probably the next person who's African American.
Yeah, it seems like some elements of public accommodations may have been violated here. Obviously, targeting and direct discriminatory practices. But the crux of this, I believe, will come down to how American Airlines, how they choose to respond. Because if the original reporting is an indication of how they treat people, keep in mind, we have people who are commenting on the social media thread, on the post, tagging me on social media, saying this happened to me too at American Airlines. So, attorney, I would assume you're getting some of those messages as well. This could transform easily into a class action lawsuit against the parent company. What say you?
Yeah, it was. But one of the things when we first started, rather than be so gung-ho about filing the lawsuit, I told him we need to expose and let other people have an opportunity to air their grievances. And, I have my cousin's ex-wife, she's a lawyer, had an issue with American Airlines. And I said, well, what did you do about it? Well, I just really didn't want to be bothered. But I've gotten emails like one that I sent to you from a woman out of Detroit who shared with me what happened between her, what happened with her husband, and how they were did not get their flight because of a flight attendant. And she said, this happened back in November. I told her, well, I'm just going to tag you along with me. And it was awful. And then we have a commander in Chicago, police commander. Her mother was locked in the bathroom. And I talked to her the other day, locked in the bathroom, and they wouldn't let her out.
Wow. She's
crying and screaming, let me out, I'm sick. She was locked in the bathroom and the flight attendant wouldn't let her out.
Wow.
And we've gotten other comments from other people. One in particular that just said, I don't have the means to hire a lawyer. Yeah. But, I applaud you in your efforts and your ability to do so. So we carry those people on our shoulders.
That's right. And as I said, when we discussed a little bit before the show, that I used to be the kind of guy who would say, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it slide. And I realized as I continue to mature as an adult, that when I do that, I allow other people to think it's okay to treat people who look like me badly. And so if I have to be the one to say something, so be it. But I'm going to teach you how to treat folk who look like me so you don't make this mistake with somebody else. Judge, I want you to have the last word here and just tell the viewers how you see what happened to you and how you worked to become a judge and the reason you became a judge to gain access to those places that were typically denied, to only be told by a flight attendant, you have to go to the back of the airplane.
Can you believe it?
Use the restroom.
Yeah. I taught at the university for 20 years prior to becoming a judge. As a matter of fact, that was not my intention of becoming a judge. But there was a judge here in Chicago that people are familiar with. He's not with us anymore, Judge R. Eugene Pensham, who pushed me and pushed. And an alderman named William Beavers and a county commissioner named John Strogers. I was so tired of those people pushing me to be a judge. It was unbelievable. But I did it. So I ran, and they always talked about my community service. I was marching with banners, and I was at the National Conference of Black Lawyers in Chicago, which we had a different reputation of being extremely community oriented. And then I was like, maybe you all are right. So, I ran, and I became a judge. It was difficult because I felt that you were so constrained when you're a judge. You can't say anything. You can't stick up for yourself. You can't, when somebody is abused, you can't go out there and rally for them. So I did 8 years and I left. And right now, that's where I am right now. I did what I felt I had to do. All the people that were helping me were gone, with the exception of the aldermen. And the Black aldermen here, the majority of them were very supportive of me, all during my elections and in my position as a judge. And I owe it to my community to let them know I'm going to stand up. And those of you, when things happen to you, most of them, they know my phone number. I never changed it. And they have the email. I never changed it. And that's when I hear from people, and they just let me know what happened. And I am going to just tag them along with me during this little process.
Yeah, I think American Airlines should have had the conversation with you all immediately. They did not, and now the world knows, and people are talking. I want to thank you both for being on the show. We're going to bring you back, obviously, if American Airlines, if they decide not to move in an appropriate manner, that lawsuit will be filed and we will update the story. But I thank you both for spending time with us today at Indisputable.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.